I'm Conor Harrington, Irish artist from Cork, but I live and work in London. I'm very interested in kind of issues of masculinity and politics and power, specifically the male ego. So I start with an idea. I start with a few thoughts that I've written in my notebook or I've written in my phone, and then the next step would be I arrange a photo shoot to get my source imagery. So I like collaborating with actors and models. I get them dressed up. So the kind of the photo shoot element is a part to my work that a lot of people don't realize, or they certainly don't get to see because I never show it. But I enjoy that part a lot. It's kind of working through different ideas, a lot of improvising with the actor. I throw some ideas out there and see what they come up with, and from there then I have a whole series of photographs that I work from, and that's when the real work starts, I guess. That's when I start painting. So once I actually start painting, very often I might work from the bottom up. There's various ways to make a painting, but I like to start from the bottom up because I do a whole series of drips and splashes and marks, and I like all that stuff to build up towards the bottom of the canvas. I'm usually excited when I start a new series of work. You know, blank canvas, the possibilities are endless, but then kind of slowly but surely as the painting develops, a few worries might creep in a little bit. So it's a bit of a cycle. You go from being enthusiastic and excited to a little bit worried to kind of enthusiastic again, and then when you get to the end, it could be a mixture of everything, really. I guess when I was young, like when I was a teenager, I did graffiti. And then I wanted to be an artist, so I went to art college, and in art college I learned a lot about art history, modern art, contemporary art. I wanted to bridge the two worlds together. I wanted to bring graffiti and, you know, art history, contemporary art together in some way. At the very beginning, maybe, nearly 20 years ago now at this stage, on the canvas I used to divide the two styles. They were separated, so I would do a canvas and you'd have a line down the middle, and there'd be a kind of a figurative element, and then there'd be a more contemporary abstract element beside it. But I had this really sharp line between the two because I think maybe it was my experience at the time that the two worlds didn't really mix. I mean, this was 20 years ago, so a lot of things have thankfully changed. But then kind of over the years I started to get rid of that line and kind of blend the two together. In one of the pieces there that's from 2010, Bang the Drum, you can see the kind of the historical figures with the graffiti tags kind of layered on top. So there's a little bit of a dialogue going on between those two worlds. Is it harmonious or is it jarring? Is it discord? I'm not too sure, but that's the way I worked for a good 10 years or so. And then now I've removed the tags from my work. I felt like I was no longer tagging in real life, and I thought it didn't really feel very sincere, I guess, by just tagging on the canvas. I think if I was doing it outdoors as well, then it would be, you know, I could justify it, but I just started to feel like this doesn't really make sense anymore. So I slowly but surely stopped tagging on canvas, and instead of tagging, I do a series of marks, splashing paint on the canvas, kind of trying to dissolve the paint or swiping the oil paint around the canvas. I'm not specifically interested in history, which maybe might be a surprise to people. I suppose originally when I started doing this kind of historical, you know, artwork, I was painting these reenactors, and reenactors are people that dress up at the weekends and reenact various wars. I just thought it was an interesting subculture, and reminded me a little bit of kind of you know, of graffiti, a small bit in a weird way, just that kind of like graffiti and hip hop culture where you're kind of trying to assume another role to a degree. It's like the ultimate power dressing. I don't paint reenactors anymore. My work nowadays is more of a commentary on contemporary politics. It's a play on power, really, ultimately. These aren't necessarily, they're not supposed to be complementary paintings. I'm trying to deconstruct these figures. I'm trying to strip them of their power, because they're kind of these figures of authority that you see in, if you go into any museum in Europe, you're going to see paintings of men, you know, I always say inverted commas, men of importance for you know, various reasons, whereas I like to paint them and kind of throw paint at them and splash paint on them. I pour like solvents to try and make them fade away, really, because I'm interested in that kind of cycle of power. I'm also interested in how kind of things, what goes up must come down again, I think is really interesting. So that's what I'm trying to do with these paintings. But they're kind of reflections of a kind of a conservative society, I guess. You know, what's happening in politics, whether it's Brexit or whether it's kind of what happened in America with Trump. That kind of aspect of politics I found very interesting over the last few years. Yeah, so I'm just trying to process all that. So Tangle Twister is a new painting that I did last year. It's part of my new body of work. So I've always worked with flags, has been a theme in a lot of my work for years. I've always been very interested in that. But for this series, I've used what we call bunting, which are this kind of a string of mini flags that we use for celebrations or for parties. It's a very kind of naive and innocent decorative item that you'll find at a party or something like that. And I just thought it would be kind of interesting to see how it looks if I have my guy wrapping himself in bunting, because when I look at politicians and kind of people of importance, I feel like they lack a lot of self-reflection. So it's a satirical look at the male ego and power. So in the painting, he's wrapping himself in bunting, kind of in this kind of process of self-congratulations, but he wraps himself up so much that he ends up getting tangled. Kind of tying himself up in his own web of lies and, you know, deceit. So that's why I call it a Tangle Twister. I guess I enjoy both. It's the benefit of what I do. I can be indoors and outdoors. I spend a lot more time in the studio, definitely. Like 95% of my time painting, I'm painting indoors. That's because my paintings take me a long time. Like I can paint a large mural outdoors in a week to 10 days, like huge mural, 7 or 8 floors high. But these canvases would take between 2 to 4 weeks each. So what I do in the studio is much more time consuming than what happens outdoors. I guess I feel more pressure outdoors because it's in public. So if you make a mistake, you're making a mistake in public. Whereas indoors, if I'm in the studio, if I make a mistake, I can either repaint it or else I just don't exhibit it. Nobody ever gets to see it. So very different scenario indoors. But I'm happy that I've got the balance of both.